Honestly, it's not a tool at all. It's their body weight. I think people, and I'm a fan of a lot of different tools. I use a lot of them, but I think a lot of times people rush to grab a weight, grab a load, grab some implement to train with, and don't take enough time to own their body weight and own how they can move just without any external influence or load.
Welcome to the Movement Code Podcast, where we help you decode movement, health, and lifestyle so that you can expand and grow. Hey guys, my name is Antonio Gerlay, your host for the Movement Code Podcast. I am a father, husband, business owner, rehab practitioner, and coach. Information overload has paralyzed many of us, and we are overwhelmed with good intentions and don't know what or who to trust. We aim to provide you clarity and confidence by bringing you expert advice for the everyday person. Thanks for spending some time with me today and enjoy the episode. What's happening, guys? This is Antonio, your host of the Movement Code Podcast. This is episode 17, and I'm getting excited because we're pushing closer to the first 20 episodes. Now, I'm not going to lie. When I first got this podcast rolling, I was hitting it full steam, had a bunch of interviews and everything set up, and it's kind of slowed down a little bit, and I apologize for not getting it posted on the week as I had hoped to do so. But I'm wanting to make sure that I find the best guests and have really good conversations around information that's going to be pertinent rather than just throwing stuff out because it needs to be thrown out. So with that being said, today we have on the episode Matt Berenc. Matt Berenc has been in the field for 20 years. He'll introduce himself here in a minute, but I really enjoyed this conversation because what's really interesting is when you talk with someone who's been in the industry for a while, you get this sense of this kind of calm, collective wisdom, old wise man type of thing. Not that Matt's old, I apologize, Matt, but someone that's had some experience, right? But yet is very humble and open to the fact that there's still a lot that we don't know, and that we're still learning and trying to figure it out. While we have a lot of experience and we've done a lot of research and we figured things out, we're still trying to figure out how it applies to maybe that individual person or how it applies to this group or population, right? And it's never just like these absolute type of things. And what we get into, right, is trying to revert back to a little bit of simplicity, which, to be honest, has been a theme before on this podcast. So, maybe that's kind of important. But I hope you guys enjoy this. If you find some value for it, again, please share, post it, tag us on social media at Movement Code, at Enhanced Movement, at Matthew Berenc if you're looking him up on Instagram. And I hope you guys really dig this. So feel free to share your comments and reviews as well. We'd love to see what's jiving with you guys and what topics you want to hear in the future. All right, here we go. All right, welcome back to the Movement Code Podcast. Today on the episode, we have Matt Berenc. Matt is a father, husband, a trainer, a coach, and an educator. And I'm going to let Matt go into a little bit more of his background and history and what he's doing right now to give a more in-depth kind of synopsis of who he is.
I mean, I like that headline. It's trainer, coach, father, husband, educator. I think that hits all the marks. But yeah, I thank you for having me on first. This is great. And yeah, I always consider myself a trainer first. I've been a trainer for a little north of 20 years, and really this has been the industry that I've always wanted to be a part of, and it's just something that I've always done. Training, fitness, it's been part of my background since my 3-year-old brothers forced me to start lifting weights at a young age. So that kind of set the cascade in motion of me getting into this realm. But I started off as a trainer, got my degree in nutritional sciences, and from there just worked basically as much as I possibly could, coaching athletes, coaching general population, anybody in between. And honestly, I geared more towards coaching the general population, people that just wanted to feel better, move better, be healthier, any of those kind of the wide spectrum of goals that one can have, because that's where you can make a significant amount of change, and that's where a lot of help is needed. So I spent a significant amount of time working with that type of clientele, and then built up to where I worked for Equinox for quite some time as a trainer, as a coach, as a manager, and then For the last 5 years, I had, prior to my departure from the company, had worked as the head of education. And then throughout that entire time, I was also leading workshops and delivering education. So that's where the trainer, coach, and educator piece comes into play. I'm not a teacher by trade, but it's something that I've built up to doing and really dove head first. Both as a trainer, leading education, but also as the head of education for a company. And how do you learn? What's our proper learning process? Because honestly, us as trainers, we are teachers. Our curriculum, so to speak, falls in the realm of movement or nutrition or recovery, but we are still teaching some element of what people need to learn, and having that knowledge of what it means to be a teacher really kind of helps connect with the connection piece, and really getting to know who and what your client needs and wants, and how you can best get them to what their goals are.
Yeah, I think that's I love that, and that's something that I am constantly. So I'm newer in the game. I've been a Cairo for now just over 5 years. I got my CSCS just prior to that, but it's really only been over the last like 3 years where I've been really pushing the training model and integrating, such as Craig Liebenson and a lot of providers do, is integrating the two models together. Is not just being dogmatic in that I'm only a chiropractor. But the the learning process has always been super intriguing to me. Is just and I've taken some motor learning behavior courses in undergrad and whatnot, and trying to understand how the human body learns things. And it's interesting because you can go down a super deep dive rabbit hole with that and how application works, and pros and cons to both. I think I got lost up in really getting very articulate about specifics and being like, this is a key element you need before you go on to the next step. But then
Mhm.
kind of learning that you can blend and smooth things out a little bit more to get more out of that. So I'm curious your thought process as far as motor learning, and more specifically, how I guess the client or the individual or the person who is doing it, doesn't have to be client, could just be you
Mhm.
as an individual. Where do we need to be more specific about steps, or where can we be a little bit more gracious with how we go about that?
I'll try to address the first part, kind of in a nutshell, the motor learning part. You know, and this will be on like a wide spectrum. It's allowing from failure, or not failure. It's allowing for mistakes, I guess is the better way to put it. Um, and this has its anchors in teaching and education as well as movement. You know, oftentimes, and I have a daughter who's one, and I have a 3-year-old son. You watch them learn to move. They learn how to move through failure. They try to stand up, they fall. They go through that process over and over again until they get the balance. They get their ability to coordinate and self actualize all of the movement needs to keep them upright. But they go through a tremendous amount of failure beforehand. Now, the key piece in that kind of mistake process is that it's done in a safe environment where the risk of the mistake, it doesn't carry a lot of weight. You as a toddler, you fall on your backside. It's not a large fall, so you're going to get back up and keep moving. In the realm of training, we can take that same approach where we can explore movement and learn new movement, and that's where I'm a big fan of the idea of play when it comes to training, because that really is how we learn to move as we get older and older as kids. You explore and you make some mistakes, but you do so in an environment or in a way that doesn't expose you to, as an adult, risk of injury, or something that could kind of sideline you for a long period of time. And so that's where the other piece of kind of motor learning and taking education comes into play, is looking for ways you can create what's called desirable difficulty. It's this idea that you want to have that sweet spot of challenge where it's not too easy, where your motivation and engagement is low, because you're looking at, oh, I can easily do that, and it's not too hard, where you're out the gates just understanding like, oh, I'll never get that done. The imagery I often use and kind of talking about desired difficulty is like walking up a low hill as a mountain climber, or trying to climb Mount Everest. Those are your two ends of the spectrum. One so easy that it's not no motivation. The other so hard that it's no motivation. But you find the right size mountain for you to climb at this point in time, where you can be challenged but successful. And so I think within movement and training, and anybody that's looking to do more, it's finding that kind of edge of ability where you're challenged, but you can still be successful. You mentioned Dr. Liebenson, who I work with now quite a bit. One of the things he's very fond of saying is find the hardest thing they can do well. That's really what you want to do. You want to get to that point where you find that movement is the hardest thing you can do well, and really keep refining that and practicing that skill.
That's such a good. I've never heard desirable difficulty before, and I really like that. That resonates well, and yeah, pretty much the same thing that Liebenson says. But for some reason, that I think the difficulty in there
Hmm.
and the desire really pairs really well together. Now, I was just thinking though, so coaching obviously helps reduce chances of mistakes,
Hmm.
and we run into this. Obviously you've seen this more than I would have, but do we potentially rob progress with this? Like where could we, because yes, we want to reduce the
Hmm.
kid safe environment. Training offers a higher risk, but we also want to increase the chances of mistakes so they can process that new learning adaptation
Yeah.
appropriately, right?
So as a coach, that's where it is the kind of the art and science of coaching. It's where to your first statement. Yeah, there are some coaches that I do think we rob some progress because we get in this habit of, as coaches, we want to fix and we want to be there and we want to, whether it be because we want to make sure they're doing it right and we want to do the best by them, or B, we want to validate our presence there, but we overcoach the situation. We constantly are firing cues and fixes and this and that at the client instead of letting them figure it out a bit. And that not only robs progress in the sense that you know we are the ones constantly owning the movement, but also robs progress in the sense that they never get that autonomy over how they're moving. The idea is that I want them to be able to do whatever they're doing with or without me there. So if they can only do it right because I'm firing cues at them, then that's not them learning. It's them being able to rehearse what I'm putting out to them. In the same vein, if I'm constantly firing cues on them, it's probably actually impeding their ability to learn, because if they're constantly in their head thinking, yeah, I always give the example of, if I'm a sprint coach and I give my sprinter, you know, 10 cues before they step up to the line, their performance is going to go down because I've taken something that should be a little autonomous, or at least they somewhat, you know, mindless to a degree. And now I've introduced so many things for them to think about. So that's one side of it. Now, this is where, like I said, it's the art and science of coaching. You have to learn where to apply the the allowable mistakes and where that you want to make sure they're set up for success, so that those mistakes won't happen. And oftentimes that has to do with max, the amount of loading, or kind of the closer you get to a maximal load. If I have somebody putting, you know, multiple plates on a barbell to get ready to do a deadlift, I don't want a mistake in the vocabulary of what they're about to do. But if I'm having somebody learn how to hip hinge or do something on a lower threshold, and I know they can manage the weight and it's now their learning process, I absolutely want to step back and be able to have somebody feel and explore and build this sense of awareness around how they move. Because what's music to my ears is not me saying, hey, did you see how this happened? It's when the person or the client turns around to me and says, hey, I noticed this, or I felt this. When they have that sense of awareness, that's where it's like, oh, boom, you're going to get it.
Yeah, I think that's a good example, and that's always the balance, because it's been interesting now transitioning, trying to take, especially when pain is involved, and pain is such just like, it's just a wrench in the cogwheel for
Hmm.
everything. There's so
Hmm.
much fear avoidance into everything, and that's the mistake for them is so ingrained in them. They're like, well, any mistake I've made in the past has been a major setback,
Hmm.
and trying to encourage them to explore and feel things out, because that's the big autonomy differentiator there, right? Is like,
Yeah.
hey, if you can figure out how to get out of it without me, that's huge. But there's so much guarding involved, which I think there's good examples in that, because sometimes increasing the load gives them that, and
Hmm.
sometimes taking it away does. So it's it's such a balance.
Yeah, I mean, it's, this is where, and it runs a spectrum of whether you're in the rehab setting or the performance setting. It's putting them in a position where they can be successful, and I think that's ultimately our goal as coaches. And there's the kind of the rehab to performance mindset where it's all training. It's just some things are just way more regressed versus some things are way more progressed. But it's all movement on a singular continuum, and it's all training. It's just where your starting point is. Uh, and as coaches, we can we want to find the things that allow our clients to be successful and to really have that movement. So again, going back to that desirable difficulty, making sure they are challenged. But somebody can't move through their hips, setting them up for a full pull off the floor with a barbell deadlift doesn't set them up, put them in a position for success. I can still have them deadlift, just may need to elevate the bar. And that's where the awareness around how you move and what you can do, not being beholden to I have to do X or I have to do Y, and really looking for some lateral kind of entry points to the movement itself.
Now, I'm curious because obviously, and what I want to encourage, actually, before I do this, because I always forget at the end, where can people connect with you best?
Probably the two best places are either via Instagram, Facebook, or I guess the best places Facebook is separate. Instagram, Facebook. Like I was never one to say I'm going to be big on social media, but that I guess now that's the world where I guess people can reach me on Instagram or Facebook or email. Anybody can email me, and my email is just matthew.berenc@gmail.com, and I'm happy to help out. It may take me a little bit to get back, but if somebody reaches out to me, I'll definitely respond to them.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure I got that because at the end we start chatting and I always forget. But when you check out Matt on Instagram, that's where I follow most of his stuff. You can see his awesome garage gym, which I'm a big fan of having a garage gym, especially in these COVID times. It helps a lot. But going back to the conversation of making mistakes and work and play, and obviously I have a feeling of what the answer is just because you have these tools that you utilize. Where do these different non-traditional tools such as the Viper, the kettlebell, and the maces come into play? Do you find that it's most people respond well to that? Do you find that it's almost too awkward and people are just like, shit, I don't know what to do with these types of things?
I think it's once people get past the intimidation factor of some of them, um, that's where you get more of an acceptance, and that's honestly intimidation can impede movement and the fluidity of movement because you're worried about what you're going to do. But once you build the level of comfort and bring it down, because a lot of people will see those tools like they see a mace and all they see is people swinging around and doing some real crazy things with them, and they think, oh wow, I can't do that. They don't realize, oh no, it can just be an offset loading tool, something that just weights you to one side more than the other. Same with like a Viper. Viper is one of the most versatile tools that I've been able to use in my training history because it can literally set up to where you are focusing on recovery and kind of restorative poses and just adding some subtle loading to those positions and postures, or you can go full bore performance with it, and it just challenges the body in a slightly different way than what traditional kind of vertical loading does with barbells, dumbbells, because of the way you're able to move it and the programming that's behind it. So I think this all just comes back to once people are comfortable with the tool and they get some exposure to really what can be done with it, then it's understanding where there are a variety of starting points. And you don't have to be doing the wild, crazy things. You can just use it to do some real subtle work and real subtle challenges to the body.
So what's funny about the Viper is uh, when I first started re-following you, because there's a preface to this story, I started following. I was like, oh, I love this stuff. It's really cool stuff. I like utilizing all the same tools. And then I was cleaning up my phone one day because my storage was full. And at the very top of my photos is I had a screenshot of you doing some Viper work from like a year or 2 years ago, and I was like, oh damn, it's the same. So it was pretty cool because I loved seeing the Viper stuff that you were doing early on, and then transitioned to more what I was following now. But I think what's important to remember too for a lot of individuals, because right now with COVID and a lot of other stuff, is there's a ton of tools, like you said. It's not, the tool is just one tool. Obviously having more tools helps with the individual and where they're at and whatnot, but I think a lot of times people get also sometimes very confused, and I'm the same thing. I'm like kind of shiny object. Oh, this is really cool. I need to try that, or I need to try that. Just remembering that it's one avenue. A lot of times you can do the same thing with just a kettlebell offset or whatever. That's why we do single arm and all that different stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, the tool really isn't anything special, to so to speak. You know, pick what you think you're gonna. And this is where I'll come back to also the play side of things, and movement exploration is part of training should also be what you enjoy. So pick a tool that you think you're going to enjoy using, and you may not know, and you because you've never used it and you're kind of flying blind, but pick something that you think like, oh man, that looks really interesting, because that, that enjoyment, that desire to want to work with the tool, that's going to create that engagement and consistency. But the tool really doesn't matter, because you can, like you said, I can offset load with a kettlebell, a viper, a mace, a club, a body, body weight. It doesn't. You don't need a lot. And then once you're there, once you're picking the tool that you want to use, stick with it. This is, and you kind of made the comment, the shiny object, and seeing a lot of things out there. I think one of the biggest challenges, a lot of, and I fall into this trap myself, is the idea of program hopping. Like you start something and you're like, oh wait, look at that, I want to do that now, and then you jump to that, and you never give the program that you're on time to actually do the work it was going to do. So, you know, pick the tool that you want to use, or pick, depending on what you have access to, pick the multiple tools you want to use. But once you come up with an idea of how you're going to train, the program that you're going to be on, stick to it. Give it a chance to work. Give yourself a chance to learn those movements and then to load those movements. I think that's the other piece of it, is just this constant changing of, exercises and movements and what you're doing. You never actually give yourself you give your body chance to actually own that pattern, and then be able to load it and stress it even more. And that's where, you know, I'll use the three words of play, practice, train, where you play is your exploration. You start kind of playing with different movements, and you get some ideas and figure some stuff out, and then you practice, which means refining that skill. And you now, once you've identified a movement through play, you practice it and figure out how you can make it a little bit better. And then once you feel confident in your form and confident in how you perform your technique, that's where you get after the training side of things, and you can really start pushing the envelope either on speed or intensity.
How often do you revert back to play? Like,
All the time. Like I try to, when I look at the overall complex of my program, I try to have at least a percentage, sometimes smaller, sometimes bigger, of time where I'm always just playing with something. Um, and it could be body weight, it could be, and those are often the things that I don't record, because it's just me like trying not to hit myself with a weight, or trying to just figure out a particular movement. But I'll get an idea and I'll test it out, and that's where, or I'll get a tool and I'll just see, how have I not moved this in the past. But I always have a little bit of play, because that's also fun. It should bring play, just as it does for our kids. Bring a smile to your face when you're doing it, because you're kind of make yourself look like a fool a little bit, which I do lovingly. I mean, but it allows you to open up different opportunities, and it also brings us back to that desirable difficulty and allowing for mistakes, because within that play realm, I'm often not with a heavy load. I'm just playing with a movement pattern, or playing with the way of getting after the movement, and then that will transition into the practice piece. And I spend a ton of time in the practice side. I've worked with, for instance, I've worked with kettlebells since 2006. I think I took my first kettlebell certification, and I still consider myself practicing the swing. And that's one of the first things you learn in kettlebells, and it's the foundation of a lot of movements. But you're never too good not to practice the components of what you're doing and the technique that you're going after.
yeah, and you made a very important distinction, is lighter load. I mean, so often what we run into is, and I was in this time frame. Now I pretty much fluctuate, and we had some social media conversations in the past, just with kids and everything. Is just like,
Mhm.
I fluctuate between pretty much play and practice. At this point in the season of my life, training is not even really an option. Obviously it could be, but it's very difficult. But understanding that when you're in this play practice component, you can't be doing like strength, and even your training cycles can't just be build 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 build. I think so often people, there's no opportunity to play or practice, just because you're always trying to go heavier.
Yeah, and you called it out and made reference to your own experience. You have to, as an individual. I mentioned the word awareness around movement and awareness around how you move, but you also have awareness around your environment and your situation. if you have a small child and they're not sleeping through the night and you're not getting a lot of sleep and you're constantly up, and like if you don't have a ton of time and you're not getting a lot of recovery, then that isn't the time to try to really chase PRs. Like you're not, but so it's be aware of what your environment and situation is like, but also what are your goals? If your goals are to to get ruthlessly strong, then you may need to spend the to think in terms of percentages. 80% of your program may need to be in the kind of the training realm, and when I say train, you're still gotta you're not pushing to the red line all the time because that's a separate issue, but you're trying to build strength, and then you got another 10% in play and practice because that allows you to add some movement variability in there and allows you to keep yourself from being just restricted to one singular path of training. But if that's not your goal isn't to get brutally strong, then look at what your goal and see how you can best approach it. So, for myself, I'm in a similar boat as you. Like I'm often crunched on time. I'm often training at 9 o'clock at night after a long day, and I just want to get some movement in. Feel like I've challenged myself in some way, shape, or form, and that can challenge can come in many different forms. It can come from the way in which I'm moving, the load I'm using, the volume I'm working with, the amount of repetitions or sets, and so there's not just one way that it has to be done. And I guess the final thought along these paths is also giving yourself the permission to know that and nobody that really performs at a high level does this either. You don't have to crush yourself in every workout. The leaving a workout feeling like you've been beaten down doesn't mean the workout was successful. It just means it was hard. Really, honestly, what we need to make sure is we're giving ourselves the permission to sometimes go in there, just move, have an easier workout to save for a harder workout later when you have gotten the sleep that you need, or you've eaten well, or whatever whatever steps you need to take to make sure you can perform at a higher level.
What does your audit system look like? So I'm thinking like when I'm looking at writing a program or kind of working with an individual, we're looking for KPIs or other certain things that we want to quote unquote focus on. How, like, for a listener who's maybe not working with a coach,
Hmm.
just because again, I always encourage people. This is the exploration and play side. Like, hey, you might as well try it on your own. If you
Yeah.
fail, you can reach out to a coach. But when someone's trying to determine what things they should be focusing on doing, whether that would be sleep, nutrition, or different things like that, how do you kind of run your audit system to give someone kind of like a framework of what might work well?
When I create a prioritization in terms of what to start with, or what should take precedent over the other things, and in those broad categories, sleep, nutrition, and movement. Sleep is probably if that's not on. And again, this is dependent upon your goals, but if that's not on point, if your sleep is off, and there may be things like when my daughter was 3 months old, somebody telling me to sleep more really wasn't exactly a good suggestion. But barring that type of experience, um, if your sleep is off, that's probably the first place to start because that influences everything down the chain. So if your sleep's off, it's been shown that you're going to make some less than ideal choices when it comes to nutrition, just due to the fatigue and decision making process. If your sleep's off, you're not going to be recovered, and so your energy levels for training are going to be lower, and your ability to learn and move is going to be reduced. So your the sleep is a real big linchpin to how we are able to actually perform. So, and when I say if sleep is off, so if you're getting 6 hours of sleep a night, I'm not saying you need to tomorrow get 8 hours of sleep because this is all about being aware of what you can do and making sure you're setting yourself up for success, be it in movement or behaviors. It's looking at okay, can you go to bed 15 minutes earlier tonight, or can you wake up 15 minutes later? You have to take an audit of where you're at and what you can do, and make some small steps. It doesn't have to be big grandiose overtures of I need to add an hour. It's unless you can do that, but add 15 minutes here or improve the sleep environment. So that that's the first part of the answer. I always bias sleep first, and then looking at training and nutrition and movement and nutrition. Uh, you can address both of those. Again, takes with nutrition, take small steps to address specific habits. And an easy way I've used the word a couple times, and this it's even more so important. in the realm of nutrition, create awareness for yourself. Oftentimes when we eat, we do so kind of unconsciously, so to speak. So, I have the picture of my dad. He'll sit in a chair and eat a sleeve of crackers without even think about it and not even realize he's made it through them. And you know, if you force yourself to sit down and do a food log and just keep track of what you're eating, I guarantee you'll uncover some things like, oh wait, I do eat a lot of that. Where you convince yourself you don't, but the reality is when you put it on paper, you do. And that's it. Creating that awareness is a good first step, and then you can progress from there. And you can just look for the low hanging fruit, like, oh, I can swap this out, or I can tweak this, and you'd be surprised how one thing gets to another. I like the phrase "success begets success." You make one small change, you get successful there. That's going to lead to the next small change, the next small change, and that aggregates over time, and you can kind of build up. So that's the realms of sleep and nutrition. When it comes to movement, you know, one thing I always audit is where my recovery levels are. And an easy thing that somebody can do on their own, which I do for myself, is I wear a heart rate monitor pretty much all the time. It's an easy way for you to track where your stress is at, how your body's responding. Because we tend to be relatively consistent. It's not always the same, but we can be consistent with what our resting heart rate would be. And if I am consistently around 60 beats per minute, and now I'm wearing my watch and it's telling me I'm at 70 beats per minute, that's that's a significant increase in where my resting heart rate is, and that's indicating to me that I may not be recovered. And so I'd probably take it a little bit easier in my workouts versus if everything's normal, then I can progress forward, assuming all else is doing well.
Do you monitor that heart rate consistently throughout the day, or is it more prior to your training? I'm just thinking because, like, I'm like, as a parent, I'm literally drinking this right now.
Sure.
It's 4:30 in the afternoon.
After this, after we wrap up, I will be doing the same. But for me, I do it consistently throughout the day. I'm also a little odd. I wear my watch 24/7 unless it needs to be charged. So I sleep with it on. I wear it at all times. So I take that consistently. But if you don't want to do that, you can pick a consistent time of day where you can consistently measure your heart rate. So if you can do it in the morning right when you wake up, great. If you do it every day at noon, it's the consistency piece that can be a big factor, because if you are variable, you take it one day at 7 a.m., one day at noon, one day at 5, there's a lot of different noise that's going to impact what that number is going to be. So if every day you take it at noon, you may have gone through some stress, but typically it's as long as it's an average day, and you can see what your day is like. If you just had a real rough morning, then you'll know why your heart rate's up probably. But if everything's equal and it's an average day, and you're always taking it at noon, then you can use that as your reference point.
What watch do you wear for those that are curious?
I have a Garmin Phoenix 6.
Nice.
It's so I got this one, and this also leads into the movement side of things. I have this one because I like the watch. It's good. It's a versatile training watch, and you can use it for hiking and running and pacing and all that. But then B, I can also it has both an optical sensor on the back of it to where I don't have to wear a chest strap, then also pairs with a chest strap.
Hmm.
Since I train a lot with kettlebells, and with kettlebells you're often holding the bell in the rack position. I don't like to wear a watch when I train, so I just wear the chest strap, and that gives me a very accurate picture of where my heart rate response is to training.
Is
Um,
the optical and the chest strap fairly accurate together?
the optical is accurate up to a point with the chest strap. The optical is accurate at lower intensity. So if you're wearing it around day to day, if you're going for a light jog or a light run, or you're walking, it'll be pretty accurate there. When you start getting to higher intensities and doing interval work, that's where you can start seeing some disconnect. And that's the case with a lot of optical sensors. It just
Yeah.
once you get to a higher intensity, it just you because of, if nothing else, the movement of the watch on your wrist, that can create noise in how it's reading your heart rate. So that's why I like wearing the chest strap, because that can give me the most accurate read of where my heart rate is, and that kind of leads back to how I know what if I'm ready to train or not. Because if I'm doing something, and this is all about kind of building historical reference for yourself. If I do 10 kettlebell swings, I know that typically, after a while, we'll get my heart rate to 140 beats per minute. But today, it's getting me up to 150, 160. Again, I'm taking in information of, oh, maybe I'm not quite recovered yet. This is that the heart rate's a good kind of system check mark of like how is your body responding to the stress you're putting on it.
Now, does Garmin hook up? Because so I was using optical on, it was like HR. What was it? It was an app. It's like HRV something,
Hmm.
HRV for training, where it sets it up and puts like algorithms on like heart rate variability and things
Hmm.
like that. Do you plug that in to like get more of that information, or you just kind of use heart rate in general as like yourself?
Typically, I'll use heart rate in general, just because it's a consistent read. But the Garmin, and I have done this in the past, check does HRV as well. And so if you do get the chest strap, basically it'll have you do it at a consistent time. I believe it has you do it'll take reads while you're sleeping.
Mhm.
Um, so I wore the chest strap while I was sleeping, and so that's you can do that with the Garmin. Now I'll do that periodically, but for ease of execution, kind of I like reducing the amount of steps to doing anything.
Yeah.
I just use the heart rate because it's an easy read.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like even just it was on the phone, my alarm goes off and I could do it, but I just after a while you just end up being like, ah.
Exactly, and so with this, because I always have it on and it's constantly reading, I can just click a button down and oh, there's my average heart rate, and it's easy for me to take a look at.
Now, have you ever toyed around with like CO2 tolerance testing in relationship to that ready state kind of variable?
I haven't. I've read the book Oxygen Advantage, which goes kind of in depth on CO2 tolerance and being able to kind of some of the drills you can do. So they have it's not tech based. It's just a manual test where you're timing how long you can hold your breath on an exhale, and while you're moving, just at a walk pace, and that can give you some insight as to what your CO2 tolerance is. So I played with that, but not with any type of technology or anything like that. The Garmin, just not to champion Garmin by any means. So it does also do a pulse ox read, so you can uh, get some information on where you're at there.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I was always curious. I haven't done too much with the CO2 as well, just because it's again, it's I'm blaming 100% parent brain fog here, but I think it's interesting to kind of just understand it's one of just a tool that you'd be able to utilize if you
Mhm.
don't a smartwatch or something like that. You can test to see, if you're there's other ones too where you do like a max exhale to see how long your exhale is
Yep.
before response to that, and that can all be trained too, which is indicative of your overall training and things like that as well.
Mhm.
I was just curious if you've kind of tinkered around with that. Now I'm curious, as far as kind of your educational role to other trainers.
Mhm.
And this might be a little bit more relevant for trainers or other clinicians who might be listening. How do you use more behavioral? I'm trying to think of the way to ask this. More behavioral profiling to try to understand the client better as how to address certain things. So, like one thing comes to mind, right? As you already stated with the nutrition, when most people talk about like nutrition or training, we know the answer. Like,
Mhm.
I want to lose weight. How do I lose weight? I just globally think really quick of what I ate over the last couple of days. I was like, oh shit, yeah, I know why or how I could.
Mhm.
Most
Mhm.
of us know the answer, but we're not quite motivated, or we have excuses, or we're stuck in our patterns. If they know the answer and you understand the profile, how do you get people to understand who that person is so that you can maybe even push them a little bit harder, or who needs to have a little bit more reserved conversation about certain things?
I think the number one thing we look at when working with trainers and getting and teaching them to work with clients on how to help them with their behavior change is really understanding first everything you do needs to be client centered in the sense that they're the they're the captains of the ship. They're the ones that know themselves the best, so to speak, and you're there to help guide them through making some choices. um, Oftentimes we come in guns blazing with here's things you can do, here's things you can do, and really as a species, independent of subject matter, we humans don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to be said like no matter how good of a thing it is for us, we don't like to be told what to do. And so if you come in and say, hey, do this, do that, it oftentimes you'll get some compliance, but oftentimes it leads to non-compliance over time because people just start falling off or they don't want to be told what to do anymore. So what we'll look at is flipping it and putting the client in the driver's seat. And this is where I come back to that word of awareness of having them come to, if it's in the realm of nutrition, asking them, okay, hey, do you have the ability, and giving them the option, creating an environment where they can say no, but do you have the ability to do a food log? Great. You reserve any judgment, let them do that. And then you talk to them and ask them about, hey, what do you see in here that maybe could change? And it's through a conversation where you build up to providing them with options. You don't tell them what to do, but say, okay, because you're not abdicating your role as the professional. But what you can do is you can come up with options. Say, so based on what we talked about, here are some things. Here are some three options that I think could be very helpful for you. Which do you think would be best? Which one do you think you can be the most successful on? Because by going through that process, by giving them the option, putting them in the driver's seat, they're making the choice and coming up with a plan. That gives them autonomy. By making the decision themselves, they have more skin in the game. Next, that's where if they said, "Oh, I'll do option A," and I know I can do it, I often use the out of 10 scale. If I say, "Okay, you want to go with option A," how confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being absolutely the most confident that you can do that every day as we defined it? And if they tell me anything other than 8, 9, or 10, then we need to shrink the change. And oftentimes, clients will potentially overshoot, and that's where you give them some chance to fail and make some mistakes. But you can always come back to them and say, okay, you said you wanted to do this, it didn't quite happen. There's no judgment. That's the other piece of it. Like, there's no berating. There's no telling, oh, well, how dare you not stick to your habit. You just very matter of factly say, hey, I see you're challenged in getting this done. What was your biggest obstacle? Oh, I could only do half of it. Oh, let's shrink the change. Let's readjust our target and then build them back up. It's a bit of a dance. So that's kind of point number one. It's really finding an opportunity to put the client in the driver's seat, to be that guide by the side, so to speak, of how can I help you make the decisions, make the choices, and be an owner over your health and wellness. Second to that, when it came to the realm of teaching, we taught a way of coaching and a way of working with the client that really acknowledged the learning environment that we were trying to create. And we used a model called the SCARF model. And basically, it's pulling from the world of learning and development. What it does is it looks at how can we create an environment where the client feels safe and comfortable to learn. And this can be in the realm of nutrition, training, whatever the case may be. And the SCARF model stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So the status piece, when a client comes in, we have to recognize that they're coming in potentially to an environment where, you know, outside of the gym world, they could be captains of industry, have their, you know, the absolute expertise in their areas in every other aspect of the world, but they're coming into the facility and it's an environment where they don't 100% feel comfortable, or they're no longer that expert. So us knowing that that may be the case, if we acknowledge their status, they identify their superpowers, identify things that they do really well, build them up, champion successes, that puts them back in that kind of higher, kind of social order, so to speak, to where they don't feel talked down to. I think a lot of times trainers, again, not maliciously, but will use large words and try to justify their knowledge base. But at times, clients read that as, oh, this person's trying to make me feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And so if we acknowledge that we have to, elevate their status, that allows us to ensure that they feel comfortable. They don't feel like they're being kind of belittled, so to speak. Certainty is I like saying the phrase, save surprises for birthday parties. Certainty allows us to ensure that the client knows what's going on. And that can be a very simple, that can be as simple as giving a quick debrief of, hey, this is what we're going to work on, or this is what the program is. It's just bringing them into the fold. Don't tell, discuss. Like that's an easy way for us to create a high level of certainty. We talked about autonomy. That's a way for us to build that ability to own what they're doing.
That's really huge, and I like that because I know just early on, and especially as like a younger professional, right? You want to try to prove, and part of this is just I think it just gets really muddled and confused by what you're trying to do from it, and by not only promoting your business because people direct you, you're trying to be the expert opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're the expert opinion, it's very hard to bring yourself down to the level that's chatting with the consumer at the level that they want without also not demeaning, but trying to like bring down what you're trying to do, because you're trying to show like, hey, we can help you, but also time we're trying to meet you at that. So I think that's a very awesome way of putting it, as far as bringing and mending those two models
Mm-hmm.
together, because they're also coming to you as the expert. So they don't have all the answers, but they have enough of the answers where they want to be, for the most part, involved in the process.
Yeah, everybody wants to have a kind of some stake in the game, so to speak. They want to be a part of the process. They recognize that you are the one that can give them more information, that you're the expert in this world, but they also don't want to be spoken down to. They want to be acknowledged. And one of the a great way you can do it is by looking at what they do in their outside life. If somebody's it's a great example of somebody's an amazing scheduler. Like, they have their schedule on lock. Like, they know what they're doing every day and what times, and you can tell this by talking to the person, because like, if you try to schedule a time with them, they'll riddle off the things they have to do, and and you can even say like, oh, it sounds like you're really good at keeping a schedule. Well, champion that, because that can go a long way in consistency with training and knowing when they need to eat. Like, that's a way that you can highlight the superpower that the client has. They just don't see it as a superpower in this realm yet. And that's it's really what we want to do for our clients, is build up what they feel confident doing, and bringing their other world experience into the realm of the world that we know, because that's going to make them better, and being able to have that autonomy in doing what they need to do.
Yeah, that's I love that, champion success and superpowers. I love it. That's really cool. So I wanna kind of wrap it up here, because I know your little kids are taking a nap right now, and that is capital. That, for those of you who don't have kids, nap is when you capitalize.
Yeah, yeah,
So two final questions here. I'm going to ask the first one as part two, for the
okay.
second part, so kind of give you a chance to think about it in the background. I try to leave the listeners with a challenge. It may or may not be directly correlated to what we've been talking about, but it could be an element to repeat. Over the next week, we challenge you guys to do this every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be the second question. The first question is, what is the most underutilized tool in the gym that you think people aren't taking advantage of?
Honestly, it's not a tool at all. It's their body weight.
Uh-huh.
I think people, and I'm a fan of a lot of different tools. I use a lot of them, but I think a lot of times people rush to grab a weight, grab a load, grab some implement to train with, and don't take enough time to own their body weight and own how they can move, just without any external influence or load, because that can be very telling. And this is where it comes back to that ability to really own that play part of things, where if your body weight, that's your ultimate play environment, because you have nothing else weighing down upon you, and now you can feel, can I truly do this movement? Because if you can only do it with an external implement, then you don't own that movement. So I'd say that's probably the most underutilized. Yeah, it is. So it's not a tool.
No, like you said, everything's a tool, right? But
Yeah, exactly.
I feel I'm glad you said that, because I'm kind of literally just today I was talking with people. I was like, we need to get you some more weight. We need to get you stronger under some, get you some more resistance. And yet I know they could be doing a lot more with their body weight. But I think it's also a balance, right? Because
Yeah.
part of the motivation with that is, my biggest concern, and this is again being a little bit greener in the industry, and for those that are the same way, you're going to feel this exact same thing, is like, you want to be able to give more. You never want someone to feel like they're not being challenged enough. And of course, if they see heavier weight, they're going to feel more challenged.
Exactly. Yeah.
But at the same time, not doing something so difficult with body weight, because it is harder for you to move in certain positions where it's like, well, this is dumb, I don't want to do it at all. And that's where I'm always in this balance of like, I want to be able to challenge you with body weight, but I know you also want more. So how do you put those two together?
And I think that's ultimately, one, just to make sure I'm clear, I'm not knocking weight by any means. I love putting heavy things overhead.
Oh yeah.
I love it. So it's just the body weight side of things. If you're choosing the pattern or choosing the movement that is challenging, that's ultimately what we want. Is we want that challenge. Whether that challenge comes from putting a bar on my back or trying to do a single leg squat, it's still going to be a challenge. And that, I think, to your point's spot on. We got to find the way to increase that challenge. And this is, again, this is where it comes back, to the art and science of coaching. Like, you find ways to challenge them and create a stress on the body that sometimes it's going to be via weight, because exactly as you're calling out, when they see the plates add to the bar, that's a big motivator. They can tangibly and physically see things are going up. But you also want to increase movement literacy, and so that's where you can create some different challenges in the patterns, and that's also an awareness and aha moment for them to try to be challenged, because then you can also empower them to do stuff on their own. When you don't need equipment, you can do it at home.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just thinking about Chris Summers, the U.S. gymnastics coach. His book of I can't remember the title of it, but it's body weight training essentially,
Hmm.
and showing simple progressions with just squatting and push-ups, and how he made extreme athletes on just doing body weight training.
Yeah, you don't need a ton, and so that's where it does lower the barrier to entry, to where, if you can get equipment, great. If you can't, you can still do a lot with just body weight, and you can use common household items if you want external load. But there's a way that you can always challenge yourself.
I know, like people right now, especially with COVID, like price points for a lot of things are
Yeah,
jacked up and it's hard to get it. I'm like, hey, just go to Home Depot, buy a sandbag, duct tape the hell out of it, and there you go. $5, you
exactly.
got 50 pounds.
Yeah, you want to, and I have a couple of these, especially early on in kind of COVID times. I did a series of posts where I was showing kind of how you can use household items, to recreate training implements. If you if you want a suspension trainer like a TRX and you don't have access to one, you can use a bed sheet to do that. Like
Yeah.
there are different ways you can do it, and so it's just sitting down and being a little creative. If you have a book bag laying around or you have some suitcase, there's ways to do it if you want external load. But then there's a lot of, like you called out, there's a lot of resources out there um, around body weight training. Like they're just phenomenal avenues where you can go down different paths of, like, animal flow is one of them. Like,
Yeah, big fan.
that's tremendous amount of play where you're trying to figure out different patterns, different ways to move, and it also, I can definitely go down a rabbit hole here, but it also puts you in a position when you're training body weight that often also puts you on the floor quite a bit. And as we get
Hmm.
older, we don't really spend a ton of time on the floor, which is not a good thing. We should be rolling around, because if you don't spend a ton of time on the floor and suddenly you trip and find yourself on the floor, you may not be able to catch yourself or be as kind of resilient to that impact. So being able to roll around and being able to kind of engage with the floor, it really does pay dividends. And oftentimes we're forced there by as being parents.
Yeah. Now I'm curious to get your perspective on this. With now COVID and a lot more online programming and whatnot, and how you've worked with other coaches and trainers,
Mhm.
how do you suggest coaches and trainers program this and communicate that? I mean, obviously we're talking about low risk here, right? We're
Yeah,
talking about body weight play. Is it more just kind of like, hey, I want you to watch this video and I want you to just replicate it?
I would say, and I would just continue to stress that point. Like, simplicity is key. So, be it with the movement pattern or the load, or if you're using body weight, particularly the movement pattern, but go simpler the better, because that sets somebody up for success. Um, as a trainer, and you're writing a program from somebody, and they're going to follow it themselves. My If you have the ability to do it, I would highly recommend at least some sort of initial consult or interaction, and it can be very simply via Zoom, right, where you can just get some reference point for how the person moves. Because if you're just throwing something out there and kind of hoping it works for them, you may be putting them in a position to do something where they're not capable of doing it.
Yeah, totally.
And so, if you have the ability to get a sense of how somebody's moving, do that. And it can just be a simple, take them through a basic movement screen where you're watching them squat. Like, go through the basic patterns. Watch them squat body weight. Watch them lunge body weight. See if they can balance on one leg. See if they can touch their toes. Can they reach overhead without giving away at their back? So there's some basic patterns, and you just have to look at how you're going to ask them to train and regress to, like, well, what fundamental movement do they need to be able to do these training exercises. And then from there, yeah, I'd say a lot of it would be also connecting with the client. Find what's going to be the most instructive for them. Oftentimes video and demo is going to be a real big way of doing it, an easy way of doing it, because then they can just follow along and they have that as a reference point. But sometimes people like a written out description. Connect with your client, get to understand how do they want to be coached, because that's going to be very helpful for them.
That's a good point.
And yeah, just and allow them to play, allow them to explore, and understand that, like I said, you start off simply, and then you can build over time. And that's as they own those simpler programs, that's where you can start introducing some exploration, some play, and that's where your videos can come in. You can give them a challenge of, hey, try this a couple times and see how you like it. And you're the what you ask of the client is report back to me how this feels. What did you notice? How'd your body respond? And it asks them to be aware of what they're doing.
And I love that last point you made, and I try to communicate that with who I'm working with, but anyone else that I'm working as a patient or something else who's taking classes elsewhere, is a lot of times, especially in the group setting, which is natural, is there's not enough client coach interaction. Most people
Mhm.
assume like, hey, I'm not hurting, I'm doing okay.
Mhm.
But for the listeners who are in group classes, is coaches want to hear just like, hey man, that was
Yep.
awesome, or like, I really enjoyed this. This felt great on this and that. There's not enough communication in my mind, especially in the group classes. So if you are a member of a gym and you're doing a group class and you're working with some coach of some capacity, tell them, even if you
Yeah.
enjoy it, it's always good to know that stuff.
Yeah. Coaches, and you're 100% right. Oftentimes, you know, if you're working in the group setting, even in the one-on-one setting, like you kind
Yeah.
of just go along because you believe the coach, kind of, they're the expert, they're the ones that knows what to do, and you just kind of you follow along. But I will tell you, hands down, coaches want the feedback and they want to hear from you. If something's going great and you're loving it, let them know, because that lets them know they're on the right track. Even more so, and this is the one that often is harder, if something's not going right and you're not liking, or it's not working for you, or whatever, give that feedback. A coach does not want to be doing the wrong thing. And so if you're working in a group class, they don't need to create something wholly special for you. There's just a tweak that may need to happen to
Hmm.
change how, the type of movement, maybe a step up or a step down, whatever the case may be. But the coach wants to hear. Don't what I say is, don't suffer in silence. Don't think like, oh, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
Like you said, just it's not hurting, so I'll just keep going. Give that feedback. That way, the coach can put some thought into it.
Yeah, or even at worst, it is hurting, but I think I'm
Yeah,
supposed to be doing it, so I don't say anything.
exactly. Yeah, and if it's hurting, even more so, just take that step back and no, let that coach know, because there's always an opportunity to do something different.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's wrap this up. Challenge, and I got one in the back of my head, depending on what you come up with. So I might add on to it, but I like some of the things you said. So what's a good challenge we can give the listeners for the week?
I was trying to think through this as we were talking. Like, what would be a good thing for them, the listeners, to try out? Um, I would say here's the challenge, and it starts off with, because I've used the word a lot, so I'm going to ask you to do this. Create an awareness for yourself on how you're moving. And so what I mean by that is, if you're currently working out and you're currently following a program of some sort, or doing exercises in some way, shape, or form, do an audit of what you've been doing and see, the are you biasing yourself to moving in one way, shape, in one kind of common pattern? Doing are you missing a way of moving, so to speak? That's what I'm trying to get at, is create an awareness around where your gaps may be. So go back and look what you've been doing, and you can go off memory, or if you keep a training log, go look through your training log. But look at, are you doing all squatting and no deadlifting? Are you doing all pushing and no pulling? Like, where are you omitting load, any type of carries? But create an awareness around what you're doing, and then fill that gap. So it's not as specific as do this exercise or do that. This is where you can make it unique to your own experience as a client, or as a somebody that's exercising. But look at what you're doing and see, what could you be adding to. What are you missing? Where are your gaps? There are basic movements that we should all be doing within our programming. So you should be pushing, pulling, squatting, hinging, and lunging, and doing some carries. And look at those different categories and see, are you missing one of them? Is something kind of not being given the respect it needs? And just pick an option that you can do to fill in that gap.
No, that's great. And right as you're saying that, I'm going through my own audit on mine, and what I just wrote down here, which I know all of us, majority, are going to be doing, is more floor and groundwork.
Yep. That's it. If you don't spend it, Yeah, if you don't have an audit ability, I can guarantee spending more time on the ground will do you well. And this can be literally rolling around on the ground. Just spend some time, rolling around, going through, getting up, getting down off the ground, finding different ways to challenge yourself, getting up and getting down. Dan John, who is a
Yeah.
phenomenal strength coach, and I believe you had him on your
Yep.
podcast. He will give a warm up challenge where, okay, lay down, stand up. Okay, now lay down and put one hand on your same side knee and stand up without taking that hand off that knee. Okay, now do it on the other side. And you find this is like that's the definition of play. He's basically saying, okay, now you have no leg. Get up without using one of your legs. You make these small little hurdles, and playing is define the rules of the game, create the obstacle, and then figure out a way to overcome it. Outside of that, all the other rules off. All I know is I can't take my hand off this knee. I just need to get up however I want to.
I love it.
And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. But yeah, that if nothing else, I'll piggyback on yours as well. Like, if you don't have any gaps, spend time on the floor. You can always get more benefit out of spending time on the floor.
I love it. Well, is there anything you wanted to add or anything we missed you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I'd say the only other thing, because like you said, this is for people that aren't necessarily coaches that are working out and they're trying to, don't demand perfection out of yourself in terms of the workout, because this is something I often have to talk to my clients about. I even talk to my wife about it. If you only have 20 minutes to work out, but you think you should be doing 60, don't just forego the 20 minutes because you can't get the 60. Do what you can get in. There's always an opportunity, and I'm not just saying just move, but look for ways where don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough. Allow yourself to get your workouts in, and don't get frustrated at yourself, because if you have small kids, if you have a hectic job, that 30 minutes can be plenty of time to get you into a good place with your fitness and wellness.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I have probably like a go-to of 5 things that I do, and some of them, and again, this is just my experience, but like my go-to is like, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do a 5-minute snatch test right now. 5 minutes, one and done, 100 snatches, and it was good. And depending on how I feel that day, I might go super light or I might go heavier if I'm feeling great, but it goes a long way.
I have the same. If I have nothing else, I got 10 minutes of 10 swings on the minute for 10 minutes. I get 100 swings in. I feel good. It only took me 10 minutes, and I move on with my day.
It's a win.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, once again, I am so thankful for taking the time, especially during this capitalization time of nap time. So thanks again for joining, and a ton of great stuff in here. So I really appreciate it, man.
No, thank you for having me on. I really appreciated the conversation, and yeah, this was great. So I thank you.
All right. Thanks again, guys, for tuning into the Movement Code podcast. This episode with Matt, again, this was one of my favorite thus far. And I just really love the simplicity and the mindset and the philosophy behind Matt's message. And again, keep in mind, just based on the title, right? Just because it's simple does not mean it's easy. We try to overcomplicate things, but yet we oftentimes we want to make sure that we are going through this audit process, if you will, this kind of keep ourselves accountable to make sure that we're not just getting stagnant, if you will. So, for instance, in this challenge that we want to do is we're looking at kind of our audit and our programming, and that can be done in a number of different ways, right? Like, are you doing all push, no pull? Are you doing all squats, no pull? Are you only hitting the accessory work for the lower extremity, not your shoulders or the upper extremity, right? And there might be reasons why you're doing that, right? We want to be able to focus the attention, but oftentimes we just get into this kind of this program where we're just doing the same thing over and over because we're supposed to do the same thing over and over, right? And one of the things that, again, as I noted and indicated, going through my audit process, like, I'm not doing enough groundwork, and groundwork is so phenomenal for a number of different reasons. When I'm tight, I usually know I'm not doing enough groundwork. What is groundwork? Maybe Turkish get ups. Maybe it's just rolling on the ground as far as switching into like some different stretches or positions, or it could be crawling. There's no right or wrong for that, and we'll throw out another podcast now that I'm saying this right now, and talk a little bit more about groundwork, some of the benefits of groundwork, and some of the things that you could do. Because oftentimes people are like, I don't even know what the hell groundwork is. So that's your challenge this week. Go through this little awareness audit system, kind of see where you're missing some things, see what gaps could be filled. And if you don't know, this is a great time to maybe reach out, even if it's a consult with a trainer. You don't have to go through their whole extensive program, but maybe you just need to be like, hey, I need a coach. I need you to look at what I'm doing so I can get a little bit frame of reference of maybe what I'm missing, and I want to try it on my own. There's so much value into that. We reach out to coaches for a number of different things, just basically, hey, I'm stuck on this. I don't need to maybe go through this whole thing, but I just need a little bit of help working through this one aspect. So if you don't have a coach, you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll either try to connect you if you want someone local, or we are more than happy to go through that audit awareness system with you to try to help you fill in those gaps. So once again, thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week or whatever point that you're listening to this, and move well. And thanks for tuning in. Bye.